Welcome, Robert, to The Root of Our Health. Thank you so much for being on here. It is such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes. So, we're just going to dive right in because I know that we have a lot to cover. So I'm just going to ask the first question. Can you tell us a little bit about you and your background?
Sure. Strangely, I spent the bulk of my career, by far the vast majority, as a cosmetic surgeon, mainly doing breast augmentations and liposuction and facelifts and so on. And people always ask me, what is a cosmetic surgeon doing as a medical whistleblower? And that is I had a sea change in my thinking when I had 2 fatalities in my office within probably 5 or 6 months, about 5 or 6 years ago. And it was very difficult. And it was just a tough period. One of them was not even my patient. I wasn't operating on him, but it's still, I participated in the CPR and all that stuff is unsuccessful. And it was just, it was a soul searching aftermath. And so I started reading more medicine, and I started to realize that, as we all know, standard medicine is a mess. I mean, there are miracles to be found everywhere, but as I research it more and more, I found out that 50% is regarded as ineffective, and we spend twice the amount of money on it per person as other countries, as the top 10 industrialized countries, and 4 times what Singapore does, and they get an excellent product. So the whole thing has been so adulterated by finances, and now it just becomes a matter of clicking boxes for billing codes, and you go to see a doctor and they are forced to look and see how they can best make money off of it, and how the industry forces them to push for the biggest revenue returns. So that's my story in a nutshell. I am completely retired. I'm not practicing medicine, and I was board certified in cosmetic surgery as well as emergency medicine, and did further training in dermatology and internal medicine.
Wow. So you have a lot behind you, and
Elizabeth, I'm 67,
yeah.
so I'm over the hill, but
you have a lot more to go. So
I've been beat up. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, no, it's and I, as a patient, because you've seen it in as a doctor, but as a patient, I know how much the healthcare system is broken, right? So you have written 2 books, and it's called Butchered by Healthcare and Hormone Secrets, which I'll link up in the show notes. They were written at the same time, right? Am I correct?
I got started on, virtually.
Okay.
But the last year I've been working on Hormone Secrets and refining that.
Okay. So why then 2 books? Why not just keep one, and then, why these 2?
Well, the modern publishing industry is such a strange animal that I had people that said I should have put them out as 4 books and I'd make money on them. Of course, nobody makes money uncovering healthcare corruption. And so there's a lot of material, and Butchered could have easily been 2 books. I mean, it's just, you'll see when you get into it. I mean,
No, I did. I saw how many pages it was, and it's kind of skimming through. Unfortunately, I didn't have all the time to read it, but skimming through, and that's where I'm coming up right now, is when I skimmed even like the beginning of it, and just
it's
it's
overwhelming and sickening.
It's so overwhelming.
Yeah.
So I mean,
and you're a provider. You should,
yes.
You probably knew a lot of this stuff. Some of the medical subspecialties, for example, they all understand that the cardiologists are off the rails. They're doing these angioplasties that don't freaking work.
Yeah.
If they work, we can get into that if you want, but the math is a little, it's outlined in my book in about 11th grade level. It's not that hard, but very few providers understand the whole depth of the thing. And that's what I tried to do, was to put it all together.
Yeah, no, and you've done a wonderful job. I mean, it was like, it is eye-opening. So my question to you is, how did you get all of this information? Like how, because it's in every area, every facet of healthcare. It's not just like cardio, and it's not just, another area, but it is every single area, especially like from cancer and knee surgery.
Oh,
So
cancer therapy is one of the very most freaking disgusting things, and we can describe
yeah,
that briefly. But
yes, go
no,
ahead.
these are open secrets. There is nothing in my book that is original. It's all completely derivative. There are 500 references, and many people have written exposés of various areas, but no one has put it all together the way I did.
Mm. Yeah, no, and I would love for you to just like speak, because again, I, kind of briefly ran through it, but
Yeah.
I want you to kind of speak to, maybe a couple of things that stand out that that my listeners would love to hear. So something either in either books.
Well, to summarize the butchered material, the insurance industry clips 25% perhaps of the gross revenues of the entire healthcare system off the top. Out of the $4 trillion that goes to the insurance companies for their overhead, their profits, and their outrageous executive compensation, which run up, 15 or $20 million for these guys. The pharmaceutical industry, everyone kind of has a feel for that or a little bit of knowledge about that, but they may not realize that the pharmaceutical industry, as measured by their yearly criminal settlements with federal prosecutors, are the most criminal industry ever in existence in the world. I mean, they're paying off our government for billions of dollars for their acts, and they keep on doing them, and it's over and over and over, same thing. The medical device industry is very similar. The people that manufacture God knows what, their requirements for study are even more slender than the pharmaceutical industry. And down from this, we've got the medical specialties, of which psychiatry and oncology, I think, are the worst. But there are more rivals for their bad practices. And in a nutshell, if you'll let me rant on a second about oncology, oncology has it's a very difficult specialty. They deal with death and dying, and in theory, they've got skills to deal with all different kinds of medical problems, because when you have cancer, you get into every conceivable problem. But they have this incredible conflict of interest in that well over half, perhaps 75% of their income is obtained from retailing chemotherapy drugs. Now, just think about that for a minute. They get about 25% or 20% of the total value of these drugs that cost on average of $100,000 a year a piece, and their salaries are going up and up and up. And it gets worse than that. They are paid by the milligram. In other words, they're incentivized to give higher doses than is reasonable. And, I'm not saying everyone does it, but if you understand influence theory, it's almost impossible to eliminate financial incentives in your construction of your, what you do. And if you have a huge financial incentive or even a small financial incentive, the well is inevitably poisoned. That's the way it works with money. And it's, the new golden rule is he that has the gold makes the rules. So these guys are in a specialty that is almost completely ineffective. And the studies on it show that they have about 2 months of improved survival for the 95+% of their diseases. They can cure about 5 or 7 entities like lymphomas and leukemias and testicular cancer. A few things they can actually treat and cure. And there are surgical cures for other cancers, but the vast majority of what they do is almost completely ineffective, and they are entirely paid by, or the vast majority of them, their money comes from these drug company relationships. Now, if we're doctors and I give you a drug to sell, and I say, look, you can take 25% of your revenues and give the rest back to me, that's called capping. It's an illegal act, and we both go to jail. But there's a hole in the laws that allow the corporates to pay these doctors what would be kickbacks in other situations. The prosecutors look pretty strictly at this, and physicians are afraid because somebody will find out they took a referral fee, which is illegal. with federal law. So that's a mess. And I mean, I can rant about another couple of specialties, but you go ahead with, you can take this towards more your female interests if you'd like, because I understand that's your focus of your podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but what you're saying, I mean, cancer is a huge, huge epidemic now, and it's not getting any better. So and that's again, coming from a functional medicine standpoint, it's like, first of all, it's preventive, but if you have it, there are so many people that are not surviving. And that's probably the reason, is because these drugs they're being pushed, but they're not working the way they should be, or that if they should. Really.
There are many things that hold great hope for cancer. The things that work or seem to work are not being looked at because they're not patented. They are generic old drugs, stuff like that. There's opportunities for functional medicines to recommend things, or functional providers to recommend things, or to we're looking under the money tree and not the tree of science.
Right. And again, I bring it up, functional medicine, a lot of practices don't even cover insurance. There are a lot of out of pocket, pay membership kind of type practitioners out there. And I think, and I know that down the line they're saying that, it's going to get into the insurance bucket. But for me personally, I would never want to associate with, having insurance, because I think that just brings along a lot more headache rather than, just being able to pay out of pocket, even if it is a little bit more. And really, it's not, because really, I think healthcare and insurance, you're paying even more than you are out of pocket. So
this stuff's gotten so expensive that the idea that we could go entirely fee for service, it's a thing of the past. I mean, the healthcare is so freaking expensive that I don't think that's practical now. But there are things that fee for service does better, but it can be a big conflict of interest. For example, for surgery, they make so much money on a surgery, they're incentivized to do surgery, and many of these things don't work. Let me make one quick point about you said that the number of cancers are increasing. Well, I made these I show these graphs of what's actually happening to many cancers, such as melanoma, which is touted as increasing, such as breast cancer, which is touted as increasing, such as thyroid cancer, which is touted as increasing. The case identification is going up dramatically because we're screening for these things, but the fatality rate is rock stable. It's the same. So actually, the number of serious cases, or the number of cases that are consequential, is the same. It's not changing. This is a hype that's being foisted on us by the medical industrial complex.
Yeah. And personally, I have, so my father passed away from melanoma cancer, but, it was interesting. I wasn't there, but I heard, my mom was telling me what his process, it was 3 months. So it was only 3 months. It was very quick. And what they gave him and his state. So it was downhill from the get-go. So it was just, I often wonder what they were giving him, because I think he was 79 and they were giving him chemo. Yeah. So it was just like, you're really not, you're exacerbating the situation here, and it's not really helping.
There's a point of view that says that this medical treatments in seniors, certainly past late 70s, are almost completely ineffective unless they have an immediate consequence, unless they have an acute appendicitis or something like that. But treatment for long-term problems, there are so many things conspiring to trip up a senior and have him or her die, that treatments that are aimed for statistical improvement of a few percent or whatever it is are frequently ineffective. And there's a point of view that says we almost shouldn't treat seniors. It's not inhumane. It's just practical, because we've got a lit fuse, and it's burning, and we're going to die from something else. If it's not a cancer that the provider sees, it's going to be something else.
Well, I often wonder, if that's the case, why don't we just die in our homes, right? I mean, who knows if the cancer was going to be even more of a detriment, or were the drugs are worse. You know, what's worse, right? Or should I, go through this at home in my, my couch, or, just relax or whatever? Or should I go through all of these treatments trying to get better, which is actually making it worse?
It's hard to make a blanket recommendations,
Right.
and every situation is different. And I would recommend to your listeners to do their best to do their research. And if you get sick, you better have some sort of person at your side who can help you make the decisions. Ideally, I mean, it's gotten so bad that you practically need provider level expertise to approach healthcare as a patient.
Yeah.
That's how crazy it is.
It is. It's foreign. Like when I had a full-time job or work at a corporate, and all of this healthcare, it's like foreign.
Yeah.
It was all of this, and you had to have somebody come out 10 times just to kind of go over everything. And it was just like, make it easy. Why is it so hard?
I don't want to say that there aren't miracles, because modern medicine is a remarkable animal, even if half of it doesn't work or actually is harmful. There are things we do cure, and many very slick surgeries that are developed, but the amount of stuff that's just done for billing codes is overwhelming.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. It occupies these whole specialties, and we have one specialty that has a sizable number of deniers. In other words, we don't think this specialty should even be in existence. We think all their drugs are no good. We know that they have never done double-blind, placebo-controlled trials on their drugs. You know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah.
Psychiatry.
No.
It's psychiatry.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And so the psychiatrists are they're run down by a lot of groups, and not just the Scientologists. The Scientologists spotted their frauds, I don't know, 30 or 40 years ago, and they've been anti-psychiatry ever since. But during that period, they have developed these drugs, or industry has developed these drugs, and essentially their standards, which is called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, that thing was developed by industry hand in hand with this American Psychiatric Association. And so these guys are all essentially, they have huge conflict of interest, which means to say that they are paid directly by industry for doing various things. And when money enters the discussion, the well is poison. There's no objectivity. The patient first philosophy can't be implemented. So these guys have are treating people. They're saying the things are working, but all their endpoints are subjective. It's what they say and what they think. The only control we really have is the third world, where they can't afford the drugs. And in the third world, the outcomes are better than here. Here, chronicity is promoted. People take drugs forever. You get on these addictive, even the SSRIs, like Prozac, they're intensely addictive. They're almost impossible to get off of if you've taken them for a while. And it's just a sad thing. Another whole class of drugs called the atypical antipsychotics are promiscuously prescribed, even for situational depression. And they cause you to die 10 to 20 years earlier. It's well known, it's well established, and it's just crazy. And all the kids are on stimulants. I mean, we've got 17% of the entire country taking psych drugs, and 50 to 70% of the entire country on prescription drugs. I mean, it's just an insane.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
and it's just like, I hear it all the time. I see it on, the TV all the time. It's amazing. Like anything that you have, there's a drug for it. And then there's a side effect and then a drug for the side effect.
That's right. Oh, that's a lot of what psychiatrists do, is medicate side effects of their own drugs.
Yeah. And that's only and that's not helping, obviously. That's keeping the patient going back to the psychiatrist. So they're putting more money in their pocket because of, it's like a cycle. It's like a circle. It's like, okay, well, we're treating you with this, so you could come back to me, so we could treat you more with this, and we could come back, and it's never ending until you die.
We don't want to ascribe bad motives to the physicians, but when the industry gets involved, the money is changing hands, and it's hard for anybody to sort out their true motivations from the money. And it's just the psychiatrists are heavily subsidized by the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, it's just, some of the estimates go up to $400,000 a piece per year. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, that sounds like it's too much. I can't hardly believe that, but I've read that. And they pay them to do fake studies, and they're all kinds of pretext for the money to change hands.
Yeah, so let's dive into then what my listeners would want to hear more of, which
Okay.
is thyroid. Because
Yep.
again, women over 40, we're kind of heading into our hormonal years, meaning the menopause and all of it. Thyroid issues, hypothyroidism is huge. And I have a story, and I wasn't diagnosed with hypothyroidism. However, I had insufficient adrenal, like it was adrenal fatigue, but it was insufficient. So it was on the cusp of hypothyroidism. But I went to a functional medicine doctor only because I knew that conventional doctors do not do a thorough thyroid test. So, which I think is the T3 to T4. I don't think they do that testing. But I also wanted obviously some more care than the healthcare practitioner would have given me. So with that being said, I want to understand a little bit more on your side about the healthcare system and treating
Hormones.
Hormones. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hormones are cheap and they're generic, and there's a law against making a patent on a bioidentical substance, which is part of your body, right?
Mhm.
So we have the real hormones, the bioidentical hormones, cannot generally be patented, although there are loopholes and they can patent individual doses. But compounding pharmacists can still give it to you in a slightly different dose, and it's still much cheaper than a patent drug. The patent drugs have taken over to the point that they've gouged us, the companies have gouged us so much that 90% of the drugs that we use are generic now. Mm-hmm. But even the generics are manufactured by the big corporations. And these hormones are best manufactured by compounding pharmacies, which are they make drugs for individual patients. They're less than 5% of the total pharmacies. It's a tiny little button on the shoulder of big pharma. So every single hormone combination has been run down by some crazy story or another. Testosterone has been run down with this story that it causes heart disease and stroke, right? And there was 2 studies that showed they looked through the wrong end of the microscope. In other words, they took people who had heart disease and stroke and see if they could find any that were taking testosterone, which it's completely irrelevant. It's not science. It's just pure nonsense. So the FDA slapped these what's called black box warnings on them, right? Thyroid has been confused because industry patented a kind of thyroid that was half of the active thyroid, or maybe less than a quarter of the active thyroid, called T4. Synthroid was the brand name, right? Well, that's gone off patent, but they're still manufactured by the Synthroid company, and that one's probably the purest ones. And indeed, patent drugs are the best quality for what you get, but they're outrageously expensive, right? So if you end up on T4, taking the real Synthroid is probably better. I mean, this is a little complicated, but I've got this hormone book edited down to 8th grade level. So it's easy. It took a lot of work to get that kind of material edited down, and without all my jargon that I'd stick in there. See, so anyway, the treatment for thyroid, the best treatment for most thyroid patients, in my opinion, is porcine thyroid. Now, if you want the really best explanation of this, go on a website called stopthethyroidinsanity.com. And I believe that's it. But if you Google that, you'll come up with it. And that'll tell you all the details about how it works. The endocrinologists are the ones who, little specialist doctors are like cartels. They're monopolies. They want to dominate their field. If you're a cardiologist, you don't want the general internist fooling around with heart medication as much. You certainly don't want them doing general. Okay, so the endocrinologists, all they have is a bunch of lab tests. They don't do any procedures. Maybe they stick a needle in a thyroid occasionally, right? But they don't have chemotherapy. They don't have, so they attempt to make their field seem as mysterious and difficult as possible. And to this end, they use this test called a TSH, a thyroid stimulating. Okay, so TSH is something that should never be used. It's not an active of the active function of the thyroid gland or the effects on the body. It actually is an inverse or an opposite effect from what you think it would be. So when the TSH goes high, your thyroid is low, right? So you can read about this at the website I just mentioned, or in my book. It's easier, more pricey. But I think that as a general rule, most patients should start on porcine thyroid, which has both thyroid types, T3, which is with 3 iodines, and T4, right?
Okay.
Now, the endocrinologists typically use a synthetic, the T4 is a synthroid, or a synthetic T4. And then if they need the T3, if they think they need the T3, they add T3, a synthetic T3. But that's a little more dicey. They've got to be careful. They got to know the milligrams. And all thyroid therapy takes a great deal of experience. And some of the older GPs have experience looking at patients and checking them physically to see if their thyroid is adequate. The tests are essentially wrong. The tests, the endocrinologists try to get you in the middle of a bell curve, right? They want your values in the middle, and that does not produce symptom relief for most people. Now, they have repeatedly claimed that thyroid treatment is dangerous, that if your thyroid is too high, you'll get osteoporosis and all these other things, right? But the reason why they're like this, and maybe this is too deep into the weeds, is they treat something, they treat thyroid toxicosis due to Graves' disease, which is another thing. It's pretty common, a couple percent of the population. Now, those people, you can't turn off the thyroid without using other drugs. You use steroids and another drug, so the thyroid will turn off over a period of months if you can get the patient to take the drug, right? So, but if you're on excess thyroid hormone, all you do is freaking stop the drug. If you feel crummy, if your heart's going fast, you just slow down and stop the drug. So the hazards of thyroid therapy are vastly overrated, and thyroid therapy is probably appropriate for 40% of the women over 40. Just chew on that one. I mean, that's the opinion of the doctors. We call them hormone doctors, the ones that are not endocrinologists who prescribe hormones. Our opinion is at least low dose thyroid with a little bit of porcine thyroid, and the doses are in my book. Now, I don't recommend this, but you can obtain porcine thyroid mail order from Thailand, where it's over the counter. Right. So I recommend that you have supervision and you be sure about what you're doing before you do that. And I tell you, the pharma is trying to put out of business these people who make the porcine or pork thyroids, which are essentially diced thyroids from a pig. Wow. So these companies are going out of business, in and out of business. There's always some new revolution happening in natural, and we call it natural thyroid. We call natural the drugs that are essentially identical to human hormones, right? Now, the porcine thyroid obviously is a pig thyroid, and that's not identical, but it has the two major components along with a lot of little piggy wiggy thyroids that don't really mean anything or count, right? So, so it's the best thing we have now, short of having, and if you go to a thyroid specialist, expect to watch what you're doing for several months with his or her help, because it does take some experience to adjust. But it's much, much safer than you think. And it's pretty easy to tell when you have too much. If you have a rapid heart rate, you better back off. If you don't have a rapid heart rate, you still feel tired and beat up, you might consider bumping your dose a little bit, or at least that's the way the doctors work. I mean, they've got other things they look at, but that's essentially in 3 sentences, that's the whole therapeutic paradigm.
Do you know if you could treat thyroid without any medication or anything? Or do you have to have porcelain?
The premise, I don't think that works very well. And essentially the premise of my Hormone Secrets book is that we're undertreating almost every senior over 50, and many women who are 45 and up need, they need progesterone support at a minimum. And without that, everybody has horrible problems, and you're not as alert. You get Alzheimer's, you get, your sexuality is it just doesn't work. There are so many people so many women who think that they have existential problems at the time of menopause. They think this is a time for thinking deeply and questioning, when all they needed was a little testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen, and then they feel the way they did when they were 37.
Right,
You know, I mean,
right.
it's not a complicated formula, and it's not philosophical. Generally speaking, you just don't. You got to get your hormone levels up to a point where you're adequately you feel good, and
Yeah.
it probably extends your life. I mean, it definitely prevents Alzheimer's. I've got 75 references in my book, which I've got 500 links in the ebook, but
Oh, wow.
you can't
You go down a rabbit hole.
yeah, you can't reference everything. And
Yeah.
so in order to establish credibility for one of these issues, which is the Alzheimer's issue,
Yeah.
I put an appendix in there with 75 references, and that is a stunning thing that is being completely ignored. I mean, we've got prophylaxis or prevention for Alzheimer's that we're not using. And Alzheimer's is arguably one of the most expensive, if long-term care costs are included, one of the most expensive issues in healthcare today in America.
Yeah.
And so, and everybody's afraid of it. Everybody's got a father or grandfather that had it. And it's a horrifying spectacle. And some of the studies say 83% preventative if the women start estradiol or estrogen at the time of their menopause.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. But nobody's telling them this.
No, it's not profitable.
Right. Right.
Elizabeth. I mean, it's just,
wow.
it's not, these corporates are looking for something that's going to make them billions. And
Yeah.
this is a simple solution that could be even cheaper than it is. I mean, you can get these things that these corporations are attacking the compounding pharmacies, claiming they don't have quality control and this and that and the other thing. But the problems with corruption of the large corporations are so much worse than any minuscule problems of the compounders. It's very, very sick. I mean, they're trying to take them out altogether. And if we lose them, we essentially will lose our good source of bioidentical hormones,
Wow.
which could be used to prevent the consumption of so many drugs, the statin drugs, for example, which they're promiscuously prescribed. I don't think it's 70 million people in America take them, and they are indicated only for a minuscule number of cases that they're currently prescribed for. The people with hereditary
it's like
hypercholesterol,
popping candy. That's what it's like. Here, have a statin, because
it's awful, and they have consequential problems for some people. I mean, they kill a few people. So
yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. So wow. I mean, a lot of this is just I mean, this is the system, right? So when doctors go through their training and their, education and go through all of everything that they're doing, I mean, are their hands tied? Is this like, because I'm assuming like doctors are doing what they want to do to help people, right? So then all of a sudden they get into the field and their eyes are opening like ours. So then what happens? Like, do they continue on, or what? Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Physicians and other care providers have some of the most impressive ethical training. They have a massive amount of training, and they are the most ethical component in healthcare today. The corporations are kind of agnostic. They want to make money and they don't care what happens other than that, virtually. I mean, they claim to have ethics, but it's not the same as individual patient relationships. But the doctors have been sort of institutionalized by the situation, which is developed in almost a boiling frog scenario. If you've ever heard that term of institutionalized somebody that's in jail, if you've been in jail 3 years, it changes your mind. You're institutionalized. You come out. You don't ever act the same. Mm-hmm. You hold your hand around your food. You watch out for people that are going to attack. Anyway, right. So the doctors have had all this training and all this conditioning that's run by the corporations. The corporations even massively contribute to the medical schools. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. They spend far more on lobbying than all of the money spent on medical education.
They don't even learn nutrition. I hear it's like an hour or so in their learning. Like they don't even learn about the good nutrition and how it can help. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
To their credit, they in theory they have a lot of other stuff to learn.
Well, true, but I think nutrition though has a big part in our healthcare. So
It's more important than exercise. Put it
yeah.
that way.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, it's
it's critical.
80%. Yeah,
Yeah.
80%. But yeah. So I mean, we talked through all of this, and again, eye-opening, very, very eye-opening. But I love, and the question I want to ask is, you wrote these books in a timely manner. Now, first, there's two questions. First, why now? And second, why during a pandemic?
Good questions. The first thing is people like me are usually basically cowards, and that we don't get started until after we retire. So you've got these heads of the these huge medical journals. They retire, and a bunch of them have written expose books, but they can't do it while they're in there because they're getting paid, and they'll lose their jobs. And it's very prestigious. And maybe they, to their credit, maybe they don't understand it all completely until they get out. So I'm someone who is completely retired. I have no conflicts of interest. And as far as I can tell, they can't do anything to me unless they come over here and shoot me, which I don't think will happen in America, right?
I hope.
It's my message is a little diffuse for any one person to think that I'm attacking them. But I did benefit from the pandemic. I was stuck in Trinidad, West Indies for 5 months, and I just did nothing but write. So I don't have any complaints about being locked up. I think that there are a lot of things that are going wrong with our approach to the whole scene, but it's become such a political football, and polite company doesn't allow discussion of politics or finances or religion, right?
Yeah.
So I can't get into it too much, but I can answer a few questions about what I think is going on if you want.
Yeah, I mean, yes, whatever you can say. Yes,
Well,
love it.
It's called a boundary invasion if I start telling people I'm a Democrat or a Republican, right? In other words, you're my patient, and
right.
You'll think I'm a turkey too. But anyway, I understood from the start that the only decent measure of the pandemic was fatalities, right? So I followed the fatalities until they took away that metric, and then you couldn't figure out what the devil was going on after that. First CDC published fatalities. And as far as the vaccine goes, I'm not an expert at this vaccine. I've sort of followed the thing peripherally, but my cynicism about this sociopathic industry, and I at least sociopathic as measured by their criminal settlements, which is seems like a pretty good measure to me. My cynicism was so deep that I doubted whether there was anything productive going on. And I did know that the two most recent vaccines were total failures. This is not well known, but you probably know something about flu vaccine. Well, the flu vaccine, if you go to Cochrane Reviews, you can read exactly what the meta-analyses or bunches of studies amalgamated together say about flu vaccine. I can tell you it's not a pretty sight for something worldwide we spent tens of billions of dollars a year on. I mean, it's ridiculous. And it's not tremendously harmful, but it's not efficacious. The other one that is less well known is the HPV vaccine, and Japan has abandoned that entirely. Now, the pharmaceutical industry uses all kinds of tricks to kind of ruin their studies and make them look the way they want them to look. And one of the tricks they use is they're not required to reveal all the studies to observers, right? The law should be that they should all be online. But for the HPV vaccine, only 50% of them are available to people who are looking at it. The other 50% were concealed because, in theory, of course, the company owns the study. But of course, as we know, we paid the company out of our healthcare dollars that we showered out of the sky on them to do the studies, right? So everything should be available. But Japan completely abandoned the HPV vaccine. Japan has arguably at least as good a FDA type organization and public health as we do. So the rest of the world seems to be continuing the HPV vaccine, but to my mind and to the mind of some European analysts, its credibility is zero. Shouldn't be used.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they haven't produced anything that worked in 20 years, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
And so my thought about this thing, which, I don't think we should bother with details about that. But my thought is that this was very unlikely to be anything positive except for a big moneymaker.
Well, I mean, they pushed it out as fast as they could, right?
Yeah.
It was like, so yeah, I mean, personally, I'm just gonna say it, I haven't gotten it just because I don't know what's in it. And I'm trying to, it's kind of like still in trial phase. And so I don't understand the push behind it and if it's still in
Well,
trial phase.
here's how, basically this behavior, the pharma's behavior has been the same for about 20 years, since about 2000.
Yeah.
But they sort of came out of the closet in the last 18 months. And now it's like, it's our way or the highway. We're so powerful, we can do whatever we want. It's like the freaking tech. So, I mean, I'm surprised that there's not some force at the top that tries to make them a little more careful about what they do and keep it concealed. But now it's like, and there's no science. I mean, the CDC and the World Health Organization have lost every speck of credibility they had scientifically. And so I'm these
well, to us they did.
Yeah.
But to the lay people, to everybody else, it's like they're God.
It's hard to decipher.
Yeah.
It's hard for them to decipher. But I mean, we're just astounded every day by something new. I mean, the CDC came out with a paper just last week that vindicated hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
And formally vindicated hydroxychloroquine. And this everybody's been saying that it's ridiculous. This whole thing's been run down. People have been censored for mentioning the treatments for COVID.
And now it's okay because they said
okay,
it. It's
in theory.
Well, we're gonna jump from that. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. But getting close to the end here, I want to I know that we covered a lot, but if there's anything from your findings or your books that we haven't covered that you're thinking that my audience should know at this point, is there anything else that you would like to talk about?
Well, I think there are some clear female issues in quote female issues in Butchered by Healthcare. And one are these two surgeries these gynecologists do, cesarean section and hysterectomy, right? And about a third of the women get a hysterectomy before they hit 60 in America. And this is too high. I don't know what exactly that should be, but it basically they're knife happy. They get paid for it. And they get paid more if they take the ovaries out as well. They get paid more if they take the ovaries out as well. And it's also an easier procedure than leaving the ovaries in. So that women need their ovaries. Ovarian cancer it's like 2% of the deaths. It's very small. It's a very small thing. And if you get your ovaries out, even after you're in menopause, you lose your ability to produce estrogen and progesterone and testosterone and so on. It's like a man, nobody suggests a man get his testicles cut off ever, right?
Yeah.
But the idea that they will take women and essentially and essentially castrate them is outrageous. And even after menopause, even if you don't get on hormones, which you'll see that I recommend if you get hormone secrets, after your menopause, I think it's crazy to take that. Anyway, so that's done too much. There are obviously indications for hysterectomy, including a lot of bleeding and whatever. But there are other treatments for it that seldom get tried. Sometimes they're difficult. The other thing is the cesareans. The sweet spot for cesareans is probably like 15%. We do a third of our deliveries are by cesarean. And it's all for convenience of the doctor or the extra revenue that they get for the cesarean. And one of my gynecologist friends said, just don't go here, because nobody's making much money anymore anyway. That's what he said. But I think we have to examine that. The numbers continue.
Yeah.
I don't know. Here's one last factoid. Your listeners may have heard that the opioid overdoses, which have thought to be entirely due to pharmaceutical companies, they, because they addicted the whole freaking country to opioids. It wasn't
Yeah.
the street drugs came in after that. That's the theory.
Isn't that
But
crazy?
the overdoses, the fatal overdoses have gone up to nearly 100,000 in 2020, and it was at 50,000 before, which was an outrageous number. I mean, it's a crazy, crazy scene.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, everybody's getting drugged up. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But let's
The
end this on.
nursing home patients, a lot of them are on 20 medications. I mean, it's just,
I can
they're
believe it.
essentially, they're farms where these
Yeah.
people are like vegetables, and they're feeding them these drugs that are paid for by Medicare and their insurance and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just an insane deal.
I mean, my mom is on like 10 of them, and I can't believe. I'm like I said, it's one, and then it's another for the side
The side
effect, and
effects.
then it's just, yeah, and then you're up to 20 and you're a vegetable. You're
Yeah.
just walking around like aimless
Zombie.
zombies. Exactly. Wow. Well, I don't want to end this on a very bad note, so I just want to ask the question: is there any hope? And can you explain? Yeah, there's any
Sure.
hope.
Well, I think you have to remain sanguine about your own prospects always,
Yeah.
right? And I think that the biggest hope here is on an individual level, and it's almost philosophical. And you have to realize that healthcare providers and physicians, they shouldn't be at the forefront of your thinking. I mean, I wrote half of this book in coffee shops in America, and all the conversations I overheard were people talking about Annie Kay, who was in there with she was in the hospital with an arrhythmia or some crazy cancer treatment or whatever it was. So I think philosophically, you should try to divorce yourself from dependence on medical care or healthcare providers. But that said, there are miracles to be had, and you need to, if you can, research it. If you have a healthcare provider in your family who understands this stuff, ideally you give them my books, and that's a good start for their thinking. There are things that can be done on a federal level, but the interests standing against any reasonable reform are so incredibly powerful and well moneyed, because we've given them 20% of our GDP, $4 trillion, right?
Wow.
That's healthcare provider gross revenues. So they're hard to deal with. The healthcare system in the United States is bigger than the federal government. You ever heard that? That's a stunning thing. It's certainly bigger than the tax. It's crazy. It's bigger than the tax revenues. Tax revenues are less than 4 trillion.
Oh.
The total federal government, since they're juicing it with this, the money stealing at the Fed level, it may be slightly bigger than healthcare, but it's in the same close range. So how do you control these guys with laws? It's like, can you break up big tech with Sherman antitrust legislation?
No.
Probably not. I mean, who knows? They're more powerful than the entities trying to regulate them.
Yeah.
So the FDA is almost entirely bought off by big pharma, because their 60 or 70% of their revenues come from user fees, which is paid directly from the drug companies to them. So they regard the drug companies as clients now. So it's not an easy thing. Here, just for the food for thought, a couple of things would do the trick, right? Take all drugs off prescription. That would do the trick.
Yeah.
See, that would do the trick. That would help a great deal. Get rid of drug patents. That would do the trick. That would really help. Criminalize a lot of this misbehavior by the physicians. Criminalize conflict of interest. They put a few of them in jail, and who took money and then acted a certain way. Criminalize research misconduct. That's done, but not much.
Yeah.
So those are ideas. There's more in Butchered.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like a perfect world, though. That's in a dreamland, because I don't think personally, I mean, obviously I wanted to end on a good note or a positive note, but personally, I don't think, because of the hand that they have in the money bag, I don't think any of that's going to be done.
Well, I think there a disaster is brewing up, and I think there'll be real change as a result of that. I mean, there's a financial disaster brewing in the whole. Well, let's maybe you shouldn't hope for stuff like that, but I think it's reality.
I mean, I hope that at least there's something good coming out of all of it. So,
right.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, this was great. So
Thank
where
you,
can
Elizabeth.
people, so I'm going to put in the show notes the
Thank you.
two books, right? The links to that. So
Yep,
to my listeners, you can download these for free for a limited time, right?
that's right.
And
At
how
my
long?
website,
And
robertyohoauthor.com.
awesome.
I'm on Amazon, of course,
Okay.
and I'm on other, and I've also have them as a podcast for free. So you can listen to every chapter without paying the Amazon for the big thing for your listeners, right? Your
Nice.
listeners only.
Oh yeah, only you guys.
Only
Only
you
you guys.
guys.
You're exclusive. You're hearing it
Right.
first. It's only you guys.
Yeah.
So I'll put that in there. I guess along that is, why are you doing this? I know you said you don't get any kickbacks, you're not getting anything, but so why are you doing this?
You know, you're you, you're very young, Elizabeth, and when you're 67, when you're 67, you start thinking about your life and you start introspecting and you wonder what you've contributed. And
Okay.
I want to grow and contribute for the rest of my whatever time I have left. And like every other senior, you never know. I have two friends die and one have a massive stroke in the last 12 months. So,
Wow.
and when you're in your 80s, at 15 of them die a year. So, anyway, so I want to contribute.
Okay.
And maybe I have a small ego and I want to be recognized, but let me tell you, there's 4,500 books published a day, I think. And it's hard to get any attention at all. I'm very obscure.
Well, I mean, this is what you're doing is not making yourself obscure. I'll tell you that, because I think when you're fighting against, big pharma and big companies like, the healthcare system, it's, I mean, you might be small, right? You think you're small, but I mean, I don't see a lot of whistleblowers out there.
No.
Literally, I think you're the only one. I mean, I haven't done a lot of research, of course, but from what I see, I think you are like the only one that's really talking about this and getting the word out.
There are whistleblowers in every one of these small fields. There are psychiatric whistleblowers.
Is there? Okay.
Norton Hadler is very good. And a lot of my material is derivative from his books, which you can get on Amazon. But this guy is so freaking smart. He can't write at an 8th grade level. You know what I mean?
And so, yeah. So it's above everybody's head. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's above everybody's head. So it took me 6 months to beat Butchered down to the 11th grade level,
Got it.
and
yeah.
So
Okay.
I think it's understandable for almost anyone. And I think I hope I got a lot of accolades. I've got almost 70 5-star reviews on Amazon for Butchered.
Nice.
And
Well, yeah. I mean, I was looking at that. I was like, wow, got to read this because this is something that everybody is raving about. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Who's raving about it? I haven't heard that from anyone
I
yet.
mean, I'm talking about on Amazon. Like, those stars, like they're basically saying, obviously it's a good read. It's eye-opening. It's nobody's ever realized what's, gone in. And again, people on the surface level may know that healthcare system is broken, but you only hear the reasons of the doctors only spending 15 minutes with them and nothing's getting done and all the pharmaceuticals and all that. But you're not really getting into the nitty-gritty of what you're bringing out to the world. So that is the reason that these books are going to be,
okay, we'll see.
Well,
thank you for your optimism.
That's how I roll. All right, Robert. Well, it was a pleasure. I do want to acknowledge you for sticking your neck out on this. And I understand that you have nothing to gain, but basically maybe a little bit of exposure or just to help people understand a little bit more about the corruption in the healthcare system in any way. So I want to acknowledge you for putting these books out.
Thank you. It's very hard to get famous by publishing a book on Amazon.
No, you never know where these things could lead. I'm just saying, one door leads to another. So just be positive there.
Okay.
But thank you so much for being on here.
You're welcome.
It was a pleasure to listen to your knowledge and all of this and your passion about the healthcare system. So
there's a lot more.
I'm sure.
There's a lot more.
I'm sure there is. And I mean, obviously we can cover a lot more, but these books will probably give them more information. So
Okay. Thanks, Elizabeth.
awesome. All right. Well, you take care. And to my listeners, you are worth it.